Hey, Schitt's Creek, started watching it again. What a great show. Like
It is good.
nobody I feel like that's like when all those famous composers and famous artists were working on this stuff, they were like, yeah, I'm a big deal. But they never really thought about how big of a deal they were going to be. And I wonder if something like Schitt's Creek just has to go through that time before people realize just how amazing Moira's character is.
It truly is. Yeah. I think it finally got the following it deserved by like season 3 and then finally won some Emmys at the end. But yeah, it's something that more people should watch and appreciate just how the first season's very Canadian.
It is. It does
It's
feel like
good
that.
and it's funny, but it takes until the second season to really sort of settle into its humor and find its place. So if the first season isn't quite doing it for you as you're watching, power through and get to the second season. But by the second season, it is firing on all cylinders and truly phenomenal.
What is Canadian about it?
I don't know. I don't know that that's the right description. I'm saying like it's a little dry. Maybe the humor is maybe I don't know.
Is that
There's
a term
something.
though that Americans use? There's something Canadian about it?
Oh no, I'm saying I know Canadian comedy well
Oh,
enough to
okay.
say I think it
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
something about the fact that it's Levy and Catherine O'Hara that come from SATC or whatever it was
Yeah.
called. SCTV? Is that what the Canadian SNL was that they were
I
on?
don't know.
Anyway.
Are they actually Canadian though, those guys?
Yeah, that whole thing takes place in Canada because the entire cast is
See,
Canadian.
there you go. I'm learning. Okay, and I will say this too. Moira's amazing, but she's not, a million miles ahead of the rest of the characters. But the rest of the characters are amazing too.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's only one.
Alexis,
One is weak.
who are you gonna piss me off and say you don't like as
It
much?
took the mayor a long time to.
Oh no, the mayor is awful. He is the worst. Every time Eugene Levy's in something, he brings that actor along, and it's terrible. I hate that guy. He's not funny. He's not. No, yeah, the mayor is awful. His wife's delightful,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but the guy who plays the mayor is just like the worst kind of cringe. I don't need. He's the guy with the pus on his eyeball and something about
Something
Mary.
about
Like it's
Mary.
just not.
Yeah.
Ugh, I hate his style of
I
comedy.
finally warmed to him part the way through season one, but they did some weird things with him too. So I don't like his portrayal of that character, but they gave him like a weird false belly and everything that was not.
Yeah, it's all just bizarre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just felt.
he belongs on a different show. He belongs on like a sketch comedy show as a hyper caricature of another. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah.
Do you know I was in a pilot TV show?
When and where and how?
Because like I went to performing arts school, and when I was there,
Sure.
I made a 30-minute comedy pilot. It's
Okay.
terrible. It's the worst, and I was terrible in it too. Like,
Do you still have the video somewhere? Can we upload this to YouTube?
yeah, I tried to find the DVD about 6 months ago because there's no way I threw this DVD away. So it's
Sure.
it's in
Right.
here somewhere,
Okay.
and if I find it, I promise you I will upload it to YouTube. It's
Amazing.
horrible.
Fantastic. I cannot wait. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat for me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. That's one line I've been meaning to ask you to change.
What?
My
The
name's
hi,
Kevin.
Andrew?
Have you ever seen The Room?
The Room, the Tommy Wiseau,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever?
And he says, "Oh hey,
No.
oh hey, Mark." He always says, "Oh hey," and I was hoping you could say "Hey, Andrew" instead of "Hi, Andrew."
Say hey, Andrew? I don't know that
Isn't
say
that isn't
hey
that the
is
same? Oh,
no,
it's
I
not.
don't know. Let me try. I'll try it, but I don't know that I don't think it sounds right in my brain for some reason. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hey, Andrew.
Oh, hey,
Yeah.
Andrew. You don't like it? Leave it as hi then.
It's fine. We'll see.
We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. I can't think of two better people to do that than Kevin and I.
And that's why we need you to come be a guest. If you've got a topic you'd like to come discuss or rant about, drop us a note and we'll see if we can get you on a future episode. And a quick reminder, whether this is your first episode or you've been listening for a while, we wouldn't say no to your going and dropping 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a nice review. And if you want to leave us a bad review, remember the name of the podcast is Pop Culture Happy Hour. Also tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there go by word of mouth, and we much appreciate it.
And a friendly reminder that we're always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment, User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve an agile process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite app updated everything and now it's terrible, we're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord in the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up talking to a coworker or something.
On this week's show, we'll answer some more Reddit questions and hopefully help some folks. We got to get you better at line reading. How were you possibly a Shakespearean actor when your line reading is that stilted? We got to if you want to do that, that's great. We got to reword it in your words, because
I just felt like doing
talking
it.
a coworker or something.
Yeah, that was the question mark in my head when I said it, or something, because it felt like there's a word missing after it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I read that very naturally because that's just my tone of voice and my speaking style. That is clearly not your speaking style.
Yeah,
those aren't the words you would choose. So if you want to do that,
I just felt in the mood to do it.
Go for it. It's great. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is a segment we like to call User Stories, where we'll eventually hopefully be answering questions that you, the listener, send in. But for now, I think we found some interesting questions on Reddit that we can tackle. Pink Floyder 1 on Reddit has the question, weird situation making me hate my work environment. Pink Floyder 1 is on a team where they decide to give the rookie engineer the chance to lead a project. The Pink Floyder 1 is apparently the engineering lead or one of the senior devs on the team, goes on vacation for 3 weeks, and then comes back and finds out that their team thinks they aren't making a bunch of progress. This engineering lead reviews the supposed bad code that the junior engineer wrote, but doesn't review it with the junior engineer. And after reviewing the code, decides to rewrite 60% of the junior's code with them just on their own over the weekend and presented it to the team on Monday. And the rookie engineer is rightfully hurt. There's a whole thing in here about the junior engineer was complaining about, she was hurt, she was complaining about the trust, and man, why am I doing such a bad job describing this question? I'm gonna have to cut half of this.
Do you want me to pretend to be the engineer so we can test my Shakespearean chops here? I heard all the shit from the dev, and she kept complaining about trust, and she became very defensive in her work. And I was hoping to get some recognition or acknowledgement for what I did in good faith, although not in the best way possible. But everybody is just a coward, including the solution architect. Now people are moving on and she moved on, and I find myself mad, and I feel if I bring this up again, it will seem that I am the one unable. Sorry, I can't do it either.
No, but I mean, so this guy goes on vacation, isn't there to mentor the junior engineer. She takes a stab at this, doesn't do a good job, which is fine. It's a junior engineer. You clearly decided to give her the chance on this project rather than support her, show her what she did wrong, give her the opportunity to make changes. You go away on the weekend and decide to rewrite the whole thing yourself. And then of course she's upset. Now the project's done. Everyone's moved on. And you're the one who's getting bitter that you didn't get recognition for doing the work over the weekend. It doesn't matter. I don't know. This one I just brought up because I think it's a perfect example of how people don't think about why they're making these choices, and you shouldn't be in these leadership positions yet if you don't have the capacity to let people mess up. Have this be a project where you can have it be 3 weeks behind because the person didn't do a good job. So if you're going to give the project to a junior member to let them grow, and then you didn't have the actual capacity or ability to let them grow, what were you doing? This is like almost entirely on this person, and they're pitching a fit in the Reddit question saying they're not getting recognition, and everyone's complaining about how they handled it. Yeah, bud. Yeah, you're the one who's wrong here. Don't rewrite someone else's code. That's the whole point of peer reviews and code reviews and sprint demos and all of the places where we put in the infrastructure for mentorship and leadership to help people grow. I don't know. It was a bizarre question.
Yeah, and I think there's always a lot more going on with these than we get from the post in Reddit. And
Right.
but again, it sort of plays into like previous conversations we've had with that hero mentality, right? This is how hero mentality kind of starts, where it's like, it was bad code and I just went away at the weekend and solved the problem. And it's like, yeah, but you broke a bunch of other rules of life working with other people, like
Right.
helping somebody improve and like, explaining to them like, what do you mean by bad code? Like inefficient, like it can be optimized,
Right.
like you only replaced 60%, so 40 was good. Like I don't know, it just seems weird that somebody would, start out their life as a hero this way.
Yep. Well, and one of the comments in there was, all of this signals to me that the team prefers protecting people's emotions over getting shit done. Now that everybody's happy that I don't get any recognition and I got painted as the bad guy. And it's like, yes, you work with human beings. Caring about how you interact with them and their emotions is not, no one's asking you to have like people do trust falls and all that kind of nonsense. But like, yeah, you do have to care about how you're perceived and how you treat other people.
But isn't this person also on Reddit whining and asking if I'm the bad guy here, but I get painted as the bad, and they also being emotional here? Like,
Right, exactly.
bit
You're the one
contradictory.
having a conniption fit on Reddit.
Yeah, it's like, don't be a hypocrite. Like, you're upset people are emotional, which, and trust me, like, listeners, everybody knows I don't do well with humans, but I understand that I have to be empathetic and deal with people's emotions. That's emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
This person doesn't seem to make that connection.
No, I definitely hope that they, and just in general for anybody, if you're gonna, you need to go into this situation knowing that that is what the expected outcome is. You are going to be in a position where they are not going to write exactly the perfect code that you would want. Welcome to being an engineering manager. Welcome to being an engineering lead on a team. Every team has the associate, the mid-level, the senior, the staff, the principal, whatever you call it. Like there's always going to be degrees of skill and talent on engineering teams, on any type of team. And if you're going to commit to saying, yeah, great, give the junior person the opportunity, then you're committing to all of the things that go along with that. And this guy didn't.
I think I like this one though, and I think my advice for people who might find themselves in this person's position is generalize. Take yourself out of writing code and apply it in other areas of life. And a common one would be to say, how would the military work if somebody just said, "Ah, screw it, you don't know how to wire the explosives. I'll do it. Just go away." That person is eventually going to have to go do that, right? And you're not teaching them, and this is why bad things happen. So I think it's good it happens over time too, right? Like people they become wiser, you hope, over time. But I think it's good to step out of your role and step out of your current position and just think about leadership in general, and just apply it to other areas and say, yeah, it's no different for us. Just because it's not mission critical or no one's going to die, it doesn't change the way you lead.
Well, and there's no way to be, I've always sort of hated the idea of efficiency as the only measure of anything, but if every single time, if you have 5 junior engineers on your teams and every time they don't do something effectively, you need to step in and write their code for them, why'd you hire 5 people onto your team? So you're never going to be effective doing it this way. It's just, it's a bad use of your time. It's a bad use of their time. You're clearly not doing a good job making them feel good about it. I don't know. Yeah. Anything else to crap on Pink Floyd or One before we move on?
No, only to say I'm hoping this person's at the early first 5-6 years of their career, because there's a lot of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what kind of person I was in my first 5-6 years. I probably think like, oh, I was great, but I've learned a lot over 25 years. So Pink Floyd at One, you are not a lost cause.
Nice. I like that. Try fixing on Reddit, keeping up energy levels with high volume of meetings. I was a product manager they use the acronym FANG, which is the Facebook, Apple, I don't remember what the other, Google, blah, 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 the big tech companies for the past 4 years. Some PMs who impressed me the most were those people who were able to be consistently sharp, focused, and energized in meetings. I mean, folks who had 20 to 30 hours worth of meetings a week and never had a moment where their enthusiasm was down and no single comment where their logic was off in my observation. I'm not that way. I struggle with maintaining energy throughout the day. I'm curious how realistic it is for me to train myself to be that way, or how much of this stems from the folks being type A. For those of you who are good at having a consistent meeting presence, how do you do it? How much of it was skill development versus being naturally gifted? And I thought this kind of went into our digital friction topic the other week, and meeting fatigue and some of the things we've just talked about in the past. I will say my job is 20 to 30 hours bare minimum per week of meetings in the product management space, and I think that's probably slightly higher for me, just because when you have multiple multiple product managers working for you. They're the ones doing more of the actual execution, and you're in meetings helping guide, mentor, provide feedback, all of that kind of stuff. But I think PM should be talking to people most of the time. You should be hearing from customers and salespeople and prospects and talking to your engineering teams. Your job is meetings. And there are artifacts and things that you're creating. But I don't know, for me, a product manager is a relationship person who is going and talking to people and getting their feedback and just listening and sharing. And I don't know, like if you're not finding yourself able to commit to this level of constant back and forth interaction, this might not be the role for you. Now, there's such a thing as too many meetings, and there's definitely a degree of, how do you keep yourself going when you have that many meetings, and how do you keep yourself positive? But I don't know that I'm the best person to ask this one, because that is my job and I'm used to it, and I don't know that I can diagnose why I seem to be good at this. So I don't know. I was curious. You've sort of complained about meetings in the past, so I'm sort of curious what you think about this one.
Yeah, so my complaint with meetings is a little different. It's because normally maybe the last 10 years you're coming into companies that you're trying to start something like an enterprise architecture discipline, right? And a lot of companies have tried it and are retrying it. So you're in meetings, but there's a context switch between meetings and then actually being technical, right? Where you're like, well, I really want to get hands on. Like I can build that big data stack, and actually I could probably do it much quicker than I can explain it. So my frustration is more like you get less done because you're having to explain to somebody else how to do it. I will
Sure.
say this though, a lot of, especially since we went remote, a lot of the way I view meetings for people who are trying to climb the ladder is, how are your companies going to see your worth if you're not able to go into those meetings? Because you're not in the office anymore. It's not like I'm looking at the junior engineer at the whiteboard with the seniors and all the seniors. I'm visually seeing the seniors listen to this junior, and they're drawing the boxes, and I'm thinking to
Right.
myself, wow, this kid does something about that. They're going to be a leader, or they're going to be an individual contributor that I can rely on. You don't have that without the office. So climbing's a little bit harder, and the meetings are really the stage, I think.
Sure.
So it's a weird one where I feel like career advancement has almost changed since COVID. How do I deal with it? I guess there's a little bit of when I still go to meetings, which is the striving for efficiency, the wanting to rally the people around you. If we have to go over the wall to certain depths, I'm going with you. I'm
Sure.
accountable. So for me, there's a necessity to it. As a leader, you've got to be there. And
Sure. I would imagine if you're a product manager for 4 years in your career, then you're not necessarily in that same situation. And I'm trying to think, there is probably a degree of make sure that you are going and you are helping your teams have effective meetings, because it probably is draining if you're going to the fifth meeting of the day and it's yet another meeting where you have no idea what the purpose of the topic is, what the expected outcome is, what the agenda is, who's doing what. So maybe there's part of it which is, yeah, if you're on Wednesday and it's hour 25 of meetings so far and they're just a slog and they're terrible to get through, and there's probably a degree of you needing to speak up and say, these meetings aren't effective. Of course they're killing my enthusiasm. Of course I'm not having fun here.
yeah, but I hate paying you the ultimate compliment. If I'm a leader on a call with Kevin Euland at the 4-year mark, not
Yeah.
only I'm not just leading alone, it's the chemistry, right? So how am I
Sure.
utilizing Kevin in the meeting to get my point across? Or how much am I calling on Kevin to say, hey, you should talk to Kevin about that. One of his skill sets is this. Like you guys should get
Sure.
together and talk through it, right? So it's not just I'm there, oh, my voice and my wisdom is what everybody needs to hear. It's just like architecture. A lot of the time you're just connecting people and saying, oh, you're looking for those smart people on the call with you, right? To it's almost like the symphony. You're like you're playing music together in the meeting and playing off each
Sure.
other's strengths.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Like, find the things in the meeting that are going to keep you engaged, and find those folks who you can bounce ideas off of, who you can share things and keep each other engaged in those meetings. Yeah, I like that.
I think it's a good opportunity to be accountable too. Like I've gone overly accepting of accountability in my career because I was worried about accountability earlier on. Like, oh, well, that person screws up. It could be perceived to be me. And I worried about that sometimes, not for long. And then pretty early in my career, I was just like, nah, screw that. I just want to accept accountability. I just always want to
Sure.
be accountable. And if I'm in charge of these people, I want ultimate accountability. If they screwed up, I didn't train them right. If they did something incorrectly, again, I just didn't train them right. We didn't talk enough, not enough comms. So I like it.
Sure.
I like to be in the meetings where you hope over time as you're working with different groups that they see like when they say they're going to chase something, they will chase it because they've accepted the accountability. So I do think it's important, depending on your level of leadership or accountability, those are the places where I feel it's more important to be accountable, right?
Well, and I think that's one of the tricky parts of product management. And I think this is probably true of a lot of roles, but product, it feels this way. I probably have a bias here, but you don't often have the authority and you're often not in that official leadership position. And so the only way you're going to accomplish those kinds of things is through influence and through leadership by example, finding, like you were saying, the people that you can bounce things off of and you can influence them to do those kinds of things. So in your role in this meeting, if you do notice everyone's kind of slogging through it and no one's engaged and no one's interested in it, you could take that on as a thing that you could make the meeting more interesting. You could speak up, you could call on people, you could find things, and you could, through that influence, it's not your direct responsibility to assign a task to Sally on the engineering team, but you could call on her. You had that conversation with her last week about that thing, and maybe through that conversation, everyone can realize, oh yeah, Sally can be the one to take that action and go away from that. So by, what are the things you're doing to keep the meeting engaged and going and people talking and making it a fun and interesting conversation? I think too many people probably also think of meetings as like this thing I have to go and show up to and listen to a bunch of people talk about, and why am I even in this call? And I don't know, maybe this is also slightly personality. I've always been the person who, if we're 5 minutes into the call and it's not going the direction I want it to go, I just say something, even if it's not my meeting. I'm like, what are we trying to do here? Just trying to understand, what am I gonna, like, there's a nice way to say, hey, just wanted to say, I feel like we're kind of off topic. Is this what we're trying to get out of this? Is that the right conversation for me and Sally to go have? Like, you gotta sometimes just speak up and fill the gap in the inefficiency of the meeting. And that's, again, one of those things where that might feel awkward to you. And if it does, ask yourself if you should be a product manager, because being a product manager is kind of awkward sometimes. It's kind of about finding the way to have those conversations and get people talking to you and sharing. And yeah, I don't know.
And that's exactly right. I think that's a good connection back to what I was saying. If I join a meeting, sometimes there's a lot of information. Like let's say I'm filling in as I'm doing something that's very general. There's a lot of different disciplines on the call, and I can speak to 75%, maybe 50%. With
Sure.
real expertise. I don't want to feel like I haven't already prearranged with people like, hey, Kevin, you are way better to talk to this piece than me. So like,
Right.
I feel like that's exactly right. That's the orchestra again, right? Like the symphony is me sort of setting up earlier that sometimes they're pre-planned where you're like, hey, we're co-hosting. But other times at the
Right.
beginning of the meeting, you say, you guys should feel very comfortable talking about this stuff. I can do it, but I'm not going to make it sound like you guys. You guys play the triangle way better than me, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think the advice here too is just try little safe things. Try one safe thing in your next meeting where you're not going to sound stupid. It's not redundant. It could be a question that's meaningful, but just try small things. You'll start to find your chemistry with other people.
Right.
And then eventually you'll start to do 5 small things in a meeting. Then eventually you're running meetings and you're doing 115 small things, right?
Yeah, I recognize that product management and a lot of jobs are, there's an 80-20 rule of 20% of the time it is kind of the slog. It's you're stuck in the meeting and it's just you and the engineer figuring out how to document the one weird tricky thing, and no one likes having to write the 5 bullet points of doing the whatever, because it's just the thing we need to document so we can move on to the next one. It's the meeting you got to have so you can just all do the whatever. Like there are parts of that, but at least in my experience, fun product management, good product management, most of my meetings are fun and interesting. I'm listening to other people talk to me about smart and interesting challenges, and I'm hearing feedback from people and getting to drill into what they're doing and ask them follow-up questions and understand why this is a problem or the thing that they can't do. If you're not, this might also be a symptom of like the type of company or role or thing that you're doing, that you need to find the joy, and maybe you're not in the right role, the right type of company, the right type of software. Maybe it's not the thing that's engaging your brain. I don't know. If your product management is fun, it's brainstorming, I'm the type of person who wants to understand what the problem is, and I want to go and ask all of the whys to understand what's really going on and dig in past all of it. All of that's interesting to me. And if that's not interesting to you, if that's not keeping your mind engaged, are you in the right industry? Are you working on the right product? Are you in the right role? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a ton of product managers out there who can't stay engaged in meetings, but I don't know. Meetings most of the time are interesting discovery processes, and that's super fun.
Yeah, I agree. And especially if you can find the right culture. The worst
Right.
cultures will be you go in a meeting and you can't be humble and ever feel like you can expose yourself and the things you don't know and rely on other people to help you fill that gap, because the culture is, oh, look at this guy, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. It's like, of course I
Right.
don't. Like sometimes I'm talking about things I don't know about, and guess what?
Exactly.
I'm going to have this person fill in the 95% of it for me because I'm willing to
Right.
accept that that person knows more than I do. So they're the worst cultures. But if you're in a healthy culture, these things are fun. I learned,
Yeah.
again, I don't want to compliment you and others, but there are some people like I really enjoy going to a meeting with because it just shapes my framework a little bit more. Like, I like
Right.
that this person says it that way. That's how I'm going to do it in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's the way to summarize this is I learn a lot in meetings. The best meetings I learn a ton in, and that's great because I don't know. Am I a nerd who just likes to learn? Probably. So yeah.
Yeah, and let me clarify here too. My final point on this is a lot of my meeting fatigue is not being in the meeting, it's finding a place for my meetings that doesn't clash with the Tetris
Sure.
on my calendar. And
Right.
it's the anxiety of there's two meetings here and both of those people think their meeting is more important, so the priority isn't common between them. So a lot
Right.
of my digital friction in meetings is, there's obviously meetings that just shouldn't be on there, but a lot
Right.
of my anxiety is where to get things in and how to get things out.
Yeah.
So can I tell you my favorite meeting story where I screwed up?
Oh, okay.
So my biggest fear in my career is being marginalized, right? Like
Yes.
pitch something, no one gets it, and then 6 months later someone's pitching that shit back to you, right? And moving on it, right? So
Yep.
this was actually we got bought together, and I was on a
Yeah.
call. I was on with some product guys, and they were pitching something to me that I had pitched to them like 6-8 months earlier, and it wasn't even a case of them not listening and just saying, oh, this was really kind of interesting, it was like they had pushed back adamantly. And so I'm on this
Sure.
call, and
Right.
the guys are, the guys from the team are pinging me like, hey, this is that basically our roadmap that they push back on. I'm like, yeah. And so I replied in the wrong channel. I replied to the meeting saying,
Oh no.
I can't actually believe right now that they're pitching my own shit back to me, but it's okay because at the end of the day, we just want it to be done. So it doesn't matter, right? Like the cool, they
Sure.
feel good about it. And they came off mute and they said, hey, you're writing in the meeting channel, right? And I had to say, yeah, but it's okay. I don't mind if you know that I know you're pitching it back to me. Because what
Right.
else are you going to say?
Right. Right.
Yeah, that was.
Oh my gosh.
But
That is
again, it
amazing.
sticks with me because there's only one other time. The other time was when I said, and I was a junior engineer. So if anyone's listening, they're worried about my credibility. I was a junior engineer, and I said these words. What do they expect when we don't QA our shit? And
Whoops.
my boss leaned over and hit the mute button, and he goes, "Now we're on mute." And again,
Oh
my reaction
no.
is, because I try to own my shit, right? Was like,
Sure.
sorry, but it's also kind of true, you know?
I mean, right,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
We were in same acquisition. We were in a meeting where a bunch of people who had no idea what they had just acquired came in and tried to pitch us what they thought our roadmap and new UI should be, and just pitched a bunch of ideas like you could have one campaign screen that does both email and digital print at the same time, and tried to do like they tried to understand what we were doing but couldn't really actually turn that into things. But they had clearly spent weeks and weeks mocking up UI screens to tell us how they thought the future of the thing should work without ever asking me, the guy who was the product person for that entire platform, hey, what does your product do? What do we want to do? Like, they just fully misunderstood it. And I didn't say anything in the meeting, but afterwards we get out and my boss pulls me aside and he goes, so your face is not good at hiding your discontent. So they all know that they screwed up really badly, even though you didn't say anything in that meeting. And we've got to work on that because there's a better way to communicate that to people. And I was like, listen, man, sure, I'll work on that when they work on their jobs. But yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let's do that.
I know how they felt though, Kevin.
I've fully not hid my discontent from
Yeah.
you before. Yeah.
Um,
I was on a call with a client and they were telling us all of their bad ideas and I kept saying, "Okay, sure, we can think about that. We can do that. We can think about that." Okay, like just like kind of the thing you sometimes have to do in product where you're like, "I'm hearing them, but nothing that they wanted to do made sense. They were small business. We were not going after small businesses. We were going after mid-market. Like none of the stuff that they wanted was an actual good idea for us to build for the feature." And then they said something that was a good idea. And apparently what I said on the call was, "Hey, that's not a terrible idea." And Burke had to go right on the whiteboard what I had said, and he drew a line through it. Like, you can't say that to them. And so from then on, I had to recognize and say, like, "Oh, that's a good
yeah,
idea."
yeah, no, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's not actually a terrible idea, is not the
yeah,
best
it's
phrasing.
not. Though I'm the kind of person who would have been okay with that, but yeah, I could see how people.
Sure. Yeah, I don't like that. No.
Now I'm replaying every conversation we've ever had where maybe you were actually being okay with me and you liked my idea. Yeah, we probably have. Yeah, we should share more because we probably had a lot of funny moments over, and it's got to be. We've got to be over 45 years of experience at this point. You started working when you were like
I know, right?
3.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. And Her Pale Fire. Wow, what a great username. And Her Pale Fire. Can you be a good PM and dislike the product you manage? So they talk about most of their jobs have been working very stressful, long hours, but in things that they are deeply passionate about. A lot of nonprofit work, it sounds like. And so then they go on to say they're getting a little burned out. And so, sensing I need a change, my husband, a software architect, suggested I pivot and apply to his company, a social media org. I reluctantly took the initial phone screen with the hiring manager and have been moved to a final round panel interview, but I can't shake the feeling that I would hate working on the product. Does anyone have experience working on a product you strongly dislike and or would never use? What do you like about the role, company, team, etc.? Can you be a good PM on a product you personally dislike? And I thought there was an interesting reply from Poodleface, again, delightful Reddit username. As a researcher, I often find it easier to support products I have no personal feelings towards. And I think that I totally agree with that. Like, I think that's why I might have been successful in this marketing and ad tech space because I'm the last person who is ever going to click on an ad or wants the email marketing thing. And so I don't have this thing. I'm not bringing a bias. I'm not a user of these things in a way that I'm passionate about. I can dispassionately look at the problem in the situation and hear all of the different competing priorities, and I'm not coming with any kind of stake in this game, and I think that might make me better at it. I don't actually know.
No, I think that's probably the way I feel about it too. And I actually wrote a lot of notes on this one. I'm generalizing always, like I'm abstracting out what the platform does from the business to well, that's just data entry with another module, like there's this
Right.
weird niche module that does blah that makes it finance or makes it biotech or makes it marketing. I can honestly say in 2.5 decades, maybe once or twice, I've been like, wow, this is so amazing. And that's not a knock on the products as much as it is like just fundamentally to my car. I don't know why it wasn't a conscious decision.
Right.
I've been drawn more to the internal frameworks and processes and operational costs, the new tech that we could use to do something faster, better. Yeah, I can't ever say I certainly haven't worked in a sector where I've been like, this is where my heart belongs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the comments in there was about like she's not passionate about it. And I think there is that old saying, right, of like love and hate are the opposite sides of the same coin. I think I could probably work on a product I don't feel strongly about, but I definitely couldn't work on like AI or crypto or something that I actively dislike, right? So there's absolutely the other side of this is I'm not saying it's something that you can like hate.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think there's absolutely like if she's gonna go work at this social media company and it's not, I mean, Facebook is responsible, I should say allegedly or whatever to legally protect us. Like there's genocides around the world that Mark Zuckerberg hasn't stopped due to the way Facebook works and terrible, terrible things. Social media is killing people's brains. I can understand not necessarily wanting to work on that kind of stuff. There's probably degrees in here, right? Of like, are you working on a thing that's just kind of goofy and like, yeah, the next Instagram feature now a video can play for 5 minutes. Cool. Okay. That's what I'm going to work on. Don't really care about it, but it's an interesting video streaming problem that I got to figure out. There's probably some interesting tech I get to work on. Okay. Versus it's, Bitcoin. I'm going to burn the building down. So
yeah, there's a couple I would definitely I certainly agree with that. Again, I can abstract it all out, so probably could do any of them and be okay. But then
Sure.
there's some that I wouldn't even make it to the interview because I'd be like, I just don't because I hate the industry and this
right.
false image of it that I built in my head. I probably don't want to talk to the types of people that do enjoy it enough to be vested in it.
Right.
Like once I
Yep.
get in there, I'd be okay. But I don't want to talk to these people like who think Bitcoin is like the future, right?
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah. No, thank you.
and it's okay to be the other way. A lot of people are like this. I can think of many engineers I've worked with who do not care the sector they're in. They do it
Right.
because, hey, I'm writing the first graph database or the first bitmap database or the first database that can do this. And it just so happens that we're going to use it for this because that's
Right.
the sector I'm in right now. But they don't really
Right.
care. They care about
Right.
the fact that they just created a brand new database tech, right? Now,
Right. Exactly.
the challenge with that is that also shows up when they reach a level of seniority that they don't understand how the sector works, or they don't understand how the platform works, and so there are further conversations about the effects of that, right? But yeah,
Yeah, you're not allowed to you're not allowed to stay ignorant of the thing that you're working in. You do have to understand how your industry and your market and your clients and your users all need it to work. And so that could also be a thing, right? Like we had years and years ago, I worked at a email marketing firm, and I mean it was email marketing. We were doing some relatively good things, but you couldn't really feel too good about most of the clients were trying to figure out how to spam people without being truly terrible spam. And we had a client that the CEO sold whatever he needed to get revenue in the door, and he sold tobacco, and it was why am I blanking on it, what's the chew, the stuff that like you stick in your lip and it kills your
yeah,
jaw.
I don't know what it's called though.
And he sold a campaign for that, and got frustrated with me that I refused to work on the campaign. I was like, no man, I've done some stupid things to like people who don't want to buy a tractor from Granger. I sent them emails. I'm not standing here with like a white hat on, but I'm not working on the tobacco chew campaign. Sorry,
Dip.
no.
It's called Dip, right?
Dip. There you
I love
go.
this stuff.
Exactly.
I'm not allowed to use it anymore.
Gross. Ugh.
Yeah, I actually had another example too, but I lost my train of thought because I started thinking about Dip.
Oh no. Gonna have to edit that out and get canceled.
Yeah. Oh, it was a good point too.
Hmm.
Bloody hell. You were talking about email marketing. Ah, it's gone. Like
Yeah.
really gone.
All right. It's because you're vaping too much. The clouds are getting in the way of your neurons.
No.
I don't know how to say this. Mr. Hinch? Hinsh. Mr. Hinch.
I just think it's Mr. High End Shell.
What is N shell?
You know, like Bash and C Shell in Linux. No.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Sorry, that was a bit of geek humor around the name. It's
Yeah, it
Mr.
went right over
Hinch.
my head. I'm
Yeah.
not that much of a nerd.
Okay.
When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So he talks about all of the different ways that engineering teams try to measure their effectiveness. And so a couple of the comments in here, I thought about how all the metrics we use also become dangerous when they are used as a target. Lines of code, code coverage, velocity, original versus actual, team capacity, story points, and how those kinds of things. I think we talked about this in the Agile episode where those kinds of things get weaponized by leadership, right? All of a sudden, I'm going to go and look at the number of lines of code that you're writing, and it's like, that's a terrible way to measure the effectiveness of a team. We're using that as like a way to go and mentor the junior person who isn't writing effective code right now. The goal is not to have these stats beat you over the head by management. So the next comment was, we talk about these metrics as vanity metrics, but I firmly believe they are far more dangerous. Not because of what they are, but how the ignorant will use them. Exactly. Management, there are many different aspects that go into every metric and a multitude of other influencing metrics. Just as evidence-based medicine was revolutionary, evidence-based management can be too. Don't focus on one metric and be blinded by it. Ensure that you have as many measures as you can to try and get a whole picture as you can. And I thought this was interesting. I think there's a number of different ways of, we talked about it in the Agile episode, Kanban tries to measure things. And I think that's sort of the tricky balancing act of these things, is all of a sudden you have dashboards showing you statistics of engineering team efficiency. And there's a lot of cases where management uses that incorrectly, but they can be helpful tools if you have good managers and good people trying to figure out, oh, okay, this stat is not a thing I'm going to go weaponize against Andrew. It's a way for me to go and mentor Andrew and have him write more effective code next time. I don't know. I think there's an interesting thing here, which is a lot of our engineering stats get in the way, actually, but they can be helpful when they're not. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is here. You're making a face.
Yeah, no, because I'm wondering, like, it's a weird. I always think about this, like being in an environment and a culture where you've reached a level of sophistication that you even have these metrics. Because a
Sure.
lot of companies don't, right? We've all been in
Right.
companies where they've got so many fires and so many other things, like they haven't found a way to measure this stuff. So
Right.
that's the good news, right? Like, hey, you're in a place where it's so sophisticated, you have these numbers. You don't like the way
Right.
they're being used, maybe. So it's like, okay,
Sure.
cool. But recognize like you're 90% of the way to Nirvana compared to a lot of
Sure.
other companies. So I wouldn't stress too much about the numbers. And then also, if you have the numbers, you can sort of spend the time to go show the value. So when I look at lines of code, like, yeah, lines of code, but actually, if you look at, was it cyclomatic complexity?
Sure.
How complex is our application? How easy is it to modify? How quickly can we onboard engineers? So I can think of specific places where those values might apply. Like, hey, people onboarding into this code is not going to be easy because, you know,
Right.
blah. Even like code duplication, like, yeah, go look at the APIs and don't worry, if you read 2 or 3, that is 80% duplicated throughout all the entities. So a junior coming in. So there's value in these individual numbers. And it just sounds like
Sure.
this person doesn't like the fact they're being added and maybe used to tell a future, right? Yeah, it sounds a bit whiny.
Well, I mean, it is one of those things. I would not want my engineering team to be somehow like, oh, you didn't get your quarterly bonus because your velocity this quarter was 20% slower, and no one's taking into account, sure, because we hired 3 kids out of college and we spent the first half of the quarter getting them up to speed on the code base. Of course our velocity is slower right now. Like, what are the types of measures that would be good for a team? And so one of the comments in the Reddit thread was ways of trying to figure out, are there things that you could measure for engineering teams that are tied to customer value? Are your iterations, are your sprints, are your Kanban boards, whatever it is, are you getting towards better value? And it's okay that the first 3 iterations failed because by the time you got to the 4th one, the benefit to the user, to the customer, or whatever was more effective. I don't know what that means in terms of engineering stats. I don't know, whenever I've managed engineering teams, I was never in the company that had the time to figure out these stats, so it never really mattered to me. I don't know that you've ever gotten to the point that you have a strong opinion about some of these kinds of things, but I was curious if there's something that would be beneficial to try and measure in your teams, even if you aren't measuring lines of code, code coverage, all of that kind of stuff. Is there something that you could go back to management and be like, look, and one of the things that came up in the thread was DORA metrics, deployment frequency, lead time for changes, change failure rate, and time to restore service. I didn't love any of those, but there are other frameworks out there trying to identify how to measure an engineering team's effectiveness in a way that doesn't suck and can't be used as like a cudgel against people.
Yeah, the challenge, and I have worked in places where we've had various versions of these, like cyclomatic complexity is a big one for me. Certainly when I'm
Sure.
onboarding into a place, because the same tools that I can get those metrics from are actually super handy when you're reviewing code anyway. So like I do get like,
Sure.
hey, by the way, this is 80% redundant code, blah, blah, blah. What's interesting about this one that just popped into my head too is the DORA metrics is interesting. I like that one because it does start to play into something we talked about when we were discussing the CrowdStrike outage, like
Sure.
recovery time objective, recovery point objective, right?
Right.
The challenge is, I think those numbers are going to be amazing and they're super critical, but actually the challenge is that 2 different stakeholders own them, and those stakeholders are usually what you would say is quote unquote IT, and the other one is
Right.
engineering. And those 2
Right.
worlds have not bled together like DevOps has bled into engineering.
Right.
I think there's probably some places that have certain types of ops because NetOps, DevOps, DevSecOps, Cloud Ops. Somebody's probably cracked that, right? But
Sure.
that is interesting because when you look at like the recovery point objective, getting the data back to a place where the customer is not broken anymore and it's the state they
Right.
were in right before the outage, I've never seen a good effort between the tech debt on engineering
Right.
and the work IT have to do to recover the system. Yeah, I've never seen that.
I did have a note in here. I do think product management also sometimes gets stuck on this when it's trying to evaluate its KPIs for how you want to measure the effectiveness of a feature. Like you can go and do things with some of the tools sometimes and understand, like we have Appendo or an Amplitude monitoring the button click usage and all of that kind of stuff. And you get stuck in these traps of like, okay, well, I think the button click is going to increase by 20%, and that's what I want to monitor for. Maybe, okay, but why is the button click increase important? Because you're trying to get people to sign up. You're trying to get people to launch the thing in the system. You're trying to get them to execute whatever. What's the value you're giving to them? I don't love when KPIs get stuck on like, oh, I've got the little JavaScript annotation monitoring whether or not the XYZ stat got higher. No. You wanted to do that because of something else. Measure the something else.
You know, you just reminded me then, one of my favorite interview questions, and I won't say I agree with it. I don't really have a strong opinion of how right or wrong it is, but my favorite interview question that I was asked on this subject was explain metrics and KPIs as they relate to measuring feature success, right? And
Sure.
I tried to answer it scientifically and 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 then the next question was sort of like which one's the most important? And the answer that was given back to me was, what about the customer's happiness? And then we got into it, and it was like I loved this conversation because
Right.
the guy was asking me, do any of these matter if the customer's happy or not, right? Like I got to measure
Right.
the customer's happiness. Like all these
Yep.
all these metrics and KPIs could look amazing, but they don't match the mood of the customer. And
Yep.
and I loved that. It was a great way to step out of the science for a minute and think of it like, yeah, you're right. Like
Right.
the customer, like the customers are happy, even though it was like our least quality delivery, or we didn't deliver as much as we said we were gonna, but they're happier this quarter than they were last quarter.
Well, and I think that's where there's a lot of times where I probably sometimes get too stuck on the software tools helping us visualize and see all of this. But there are cases where I wish a lot of our software did a better job of, when you're in the weeds working on the user story to write the new screen that has the new button on it, can you very quickly, easily follow the path back through the KPI, which is we want to see the screen get submitted 20% more, up to the reason for that is because renewals are down and we want to get more people renewing. And so we think that if they can do this faster, they're going to be happier, and we're going to, right? Like we don't have the chain all the way back to the top of like, why were we doing this? Not because we wanted the query to run faster, and we wanted the query to run faster because we wanted the screen to load faster, and we wanted the screen to load faster because we did, right? Like the chain gets lost. And so a lot of the times I don't know that everyone is engineering things towards that actual value. Is the user happy? Is the customer happy? And happiness isn't always the right metric, but it is one of the more common ones that you could try to be thinking about. And yeah, I don't know that we support product people and engineers and QA people and everyone in this life cycle of always keeping that in mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like I think of like one of the toughest jobs I had. It was running IT in aviation, right? That is one of the most stressful jobs I've ever done.
Sure.
And just highly complex. And I remember early on, the customers never really happy, right? Because they're airlines. There's always something going wrong, like COVID.
Sure.
Oh, CrowdStrike. Like it's just aviation. It's expensive and
Right.
it's stressful. And we were having some challenges with stability. But I think the greatest change we made was not with software. It was my availability as head of IT to be available to them in person, real time, right? And they said, I remember talking to one of the big European airlines, and they said, look, we know you have challenges, but we feel a lot better now that we have you and the COO
Sure.
on speed dial and as many face-to-face conversations as we've had. We trust you'll recover, but we just feel better now. We feel like it's a partnership and not a vendor-customer relationship.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. To read articles we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptancecriteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog, and I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at kthomaseuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.